Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversations with Coaches podcast. I'm your usual host, Kevin, and today I have had the pleasure already of speaking with Mike Horne. Mike helps leaders work with the consequences of poor culture and people decisions to advance authentic leadership and prosperity. And authentic leadership, quite frankly, is in caps, and it should be. I love that. You can get to know Mike a little bit better at mike-horne.com. But for now, we're going to get a chance to know Mike a little bit better here. Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today about who you are, what you do.
Kevin, I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. When I think about authenticity, I think about how we bring more of who we are to what we do. And it's great to be able to chat about that with you and share it with your audience, because so many people, they want to be authentic in life. And yet when I ask audiences time and time again, are you more authentic at home or at work? The answer is usually the same. Oh, I'm more authentic at home than I am at work. So I always wonder, what are we leaving on the table in terms of the talent that we bring, in terms of our abilities to grow and to develop, and why it's so difficult, why there are so many barriers to authenticity at work.
Man, I know this is a short form podcast, but as you set that up, I'm like, and let's begin our 3-hour conversation about that, because and honestly, that is a subject that comes up frequently on this podcast, because
I'm sure
if there's one thing that pretty much every single coach worth their salt is very much all about, is authenticity and showing up, like you said, being able to show up in the places you want to show up authentically as yourself, because you are, valuable. You have things to bring to the table that, these not false, but these constructs of work and different, the ins and outs of how we interact, quote unquote, professionally, it can be as amplifying as it is limiting. And I think we have an interesting course to navigate, especially now that I think we know more about how to value authenticity. I know I've just kind of like kicked us right off into like the concept discussion, but I feel like there's a greater awareness of the necessity of authenticity in the workplace, in the professional environments. And I can sense, and I can see, and I can experience an embracing of that. So it feels like a very ripe time for authentic leadership.
so interesting, because as I compare that, or I think about that, or I juxtapose it with what goes on in North American politics, particularly U.S. politics, maybe there is a lack of authenticity that occurs. And yet in business, I mean, to your example, it's about how do we get people to bring more of who they are to what they do. And when we think about what does it mean to be authentic, it means that there's some congruence, right, between what I say and what I do, and even better, if it's among what I think, say, and do.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we drive that authenticity in, organizational life when so many people are scared to do this or afraid to do that, or face consequences for bringing more of who they are to what they do?
It's always, I mean, it's oversimplifying, but there's a whole lot of fear at the heart of it. I think both how we choose to bring ourselves to the table professionally, and also the structures that maybe restrict or give us pause or anxiety about what the consequences might be. It's a big word, consequences, when it comes to authenticity.
Well, so insightful, Kevin, because in so many organizations, whether they're small or large, there are structural inequalities at play, right? We build it into the way that we think about some systems, some organizational systems, and it can be tough to speak up in an organization. And yet, what does it mean to have integrity? Integrity is all about the real deal, right? It's about being able to bring who you are to what you do. It's about, things are in sync, they're in alignment. And, that creates, I think, a good sense of self, a sense of identity, which a person can then bring into the world.
You said two of my favorite words right there in that description. Obviously, we were talking about authenticity, alignment. It comes up constantly, and there's like all sorts of analogies always pop into my head. Like I'm thinking about people rowing in concert, to where if you get your timing right and everybody's aligned, it's amazing how far and how fast you can go. And just alignment is such a huge key to, I mean, you talk about getting everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction, working on the same project, it's all this stuff. It's so important to even showing up authentically as an individual, being in alignment with the people around you, even as you are different and have differing opinions on things and differing approaches to things. If you are in alignment with each other, you can bring all of that to the table in a way that's not going to restrict or hamper your progress. It's going to actually amplify it. It's going to work towards it. And that's definitely a not an indictment, but definitely is an indicator of our systems and structures, whether or not when you come authentically, is there an opportunity for the alignment that you're seeking, but you can all come together and be working in your own ways towards that unified goal, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think it makes a lot of sense. And to think about it in terms of how we're able to bring more of who we are to what we do, and what organizational systems support that. In many ways, it's shape up or ship out. And there's a lot of conformity in organizational life. And I think it's easy for us to say, well, sure, bring who you are to what you do. And to your point then, Kevin, it goes to thinking about or considering the systems and structures, that are at play in organizational life.
Absolutely. I feel like we jumped right into the meaty stuff. I want to make sure that
Why
I ask
not?
you. So, why not? Of course, but I wanted to get to know you a little bit, and I'm wondering how you got on this path in the first place. You've obviously been doing this for quite some time, and it's very, very important to you. So yeah, how did you get your start as a coach? How did you find yourself committed to growing authentic leadership in individuals and in workplaces? Like, how did you get your start? What's your superhero origin story here? I'm curious.
My superhero origin story in this regard is probably the United Farm Workers Movement and the UFW and Cesar
Ooh.
Chavez and Dolores Huerta and all the great folks during the lettuce boycotts, really giving me a way to think about the world as bigger than myself. Probably later, identity formations around the Peace Corps when I was a volunteer in the Solomons. So I think in large part, not in large part. I mean, I define my role as a coach, mentor, and teacher. I've had a lot of roles in that regard as an organizational executive, as a consultant, and as a coach.
Excellent. I'd only done the most cursory of glances at your LinkedIn
Sure.
before we talked. That's excellent. I didn't know that. That's kind of how you got your start and your inspiration. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I've been teaching most of my career as well. So that's really helpful as a way of learning and being in touch with the ideas that people bring into an environment in which to learn.
Yeah, you say that, and I'm very much not surprised. You have such a measured and open and inviting way of communicating, and it's
Oh,
not
that's
just
so
about
nice
your
of
voice,
you to say.
but you do, because it's tough to be both. A lot of times, I'll talk to people and they're measured and they have their words. They're not reading from a script. They're speaking authentically, but they have the things that they're saying. But the way that you communicate yourself is both measured and concise, and also open and available. And I feel like that's not only possible, but crucial to be both, to have strong opinions and to have well-formed thoughts and be able to communicate them with precision, and be open and empathetic and adaptable and available in ways that allow other people to not just get to know you better, but also to bring it back to what we were talking about at the beginning, to bring their full selves to the table authentically, if that's a table that you're sitting at. It's both a compliment and a subject to speak on, because I find it fascinating that we for so long kind of had a separate way of thinking of those two concepts, and that really it feels like the wedding of those two, the marriage of those two, is where the real power is, and I think we're seeing that now more today.
Well, I think we were locked into some conventional wisdom around the separation of work and life, and if anything, the recent pandemic has taught us is that there's little separation between work and life. And it's interesting to see leaders and managers struggling with these issues now about control and where is the locus of work, and how does that affect people and their affinity to the organization, and how does it affect the challenges and demands of managers.
I use that word control, and I often think about, I have talked to a lot of coaches who have, one of the reasons why they've dedicated themselves to coaching, in particular in business and in the executive environment, is that older model of command and control. You hear that spoken of so often, command and control, and it's not exactly a popular way to phrase it these days. But yeah, there is a whenever, and I'm not speculating here, but I'm kind of just ruminating here. Whenever someone tends to feel a loss of control, there's almost always that reflexive grasping to get it back, regardless of whether or not the best thing for everybody might be a little bit of slippage there when it comes to that control. But there's just a reflex there that I think we're kind of experiencing right now when it comes to how we work. And that doesn't just mean, showing up in an office or being around a water cooler or in a conference room, just how we work. I feel like we've gotten a tremendous opportunity to really look at our whys in that regard and make some considerable changes to how we go about working, so that not just so that we can feel better about things, but also so that we can do more and be better.
And to understand our drives around control in particular, there are some people who really like to have a lot controlled in their lives.
Yeah.
And there are others who don't like that. And I think having a good sense of who you are and relative to the control that you express in situations versus the control that you want others to have for you, I think it's very important to understand all of that.
And I feel like we've got some currency to spend in that regard too. I feel like I said, that there's an awareness of the importance of it and of the value of it. And I feel like it's like you got to strike while the iron's hot. I feel like these kinds of conversations are happening all over the world, I think. But certainly here in America, where it's just, we have the opportunity and we have a little bit of license to thrill, so to speak. It really make some changes in things that
Nice
we've for a long
it.
time thought, that we've thought of as very entrenched, very very actually entrenched is probably the best word for it, because it feels very like stuck in a rut.
Well, that's I think that's true of a lot of organizations, is that they are stuck in ruts, right? And people like to have a certain degree of comfort in their organizational experience. And I think that's what's in part so disruptive about work and where work takes place today and how people are thinking about it.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit, kind of a question that kind of comes across almost like you're in an interrogation. It's like, what did you know and when did you know it? That kind of thing. But I like to ask, who do you coach and how do you coach them? And that's basically what kinds of people or what kinds of industries or areas do you focus on coaching? What your typical client base, like who are they? Like where are they at in their career and their life? And also how you coach them. I mean, obviously one-to-one is where almost everybody gets their start. It continues to be where some of the real depth can happen. But a lot of coaches are like, they have keynote speaking, they have books, they have programs and masterminds of various sizes and types. So really, who do you coach and how do you coach them these days?
I coach smart people, and primarily people who are scientists, engineers, or some other kind of technologist. And you might characterize those as smart people. I work with generally people who have a lot of book smarts, maybe doctorates, maybe they're MDs, but people who are often involved in the sciences and in engineering and in technology. And those are primarily the folks with whom I work. And it's great. It's a great honor and it's a great privilege to be in touch with those folks who are doing amazing things and have done amazing things in the world. And usually they're at some sort of transition point. Often if you think about the stereotypes of scientists and other technologists, we have a range of them, from absent-minded professor to somebody who's very standoffish, and I like to work at all of those intersections.
That's lovely. It reminds me of a conversation I had. I forget with who, but it was a number of months ago. I think it was back in the summer. And a lot of his focus was around a similar subset of people and he talked about it very eloquently about how when you have these really high skill, high knowledge positions, you really just have to have a lot of education and know a lot and be really good at what you do. And as you're really that good at what you do tend to progress through an organization's hierarchy. And then eventually you get to a point where the skills you need to excel in a role are no longer the same skills that you needed to excel in your previous role, to where you now need leadership skills and how to lead and guide and run a team, and how to organize a team, and how to motivate and inspire, and also how to manage the work that you're so used to doing yourself because you were so great at it. And that is a tricky crossroads to navigate. And I think we lose a lot of talented, skilled, passionate people in that sort of messy middle, that sort of strange transition period. And having coaches like you at those crossroads, almost as guideposts yourself, where you can step alongside of people and it's like, here, let me help you transition. And so you can continue to be as great at this as you always have been. There's some new skills you need. Let me teach you and let's work on developing them. I feel like that role that you provide is so important.
And that there's one word I'd add to that entire mix, which is collegiality, because often in highly technical environments of technologists, scientists, MD PhDs, there's a lot of smarts, around the table. But to think about it in terms of collegiality and how we interact with one another is so important, because often, command and control situations, won't work, particularly in those environments.
Yeah. Man, there's so much meat on all of these bones that we've been talking about, but as promised, the time has flown by. We've already been chatting for nearly 20 minutes now. So I want to give you a chance to let the audience know, and let me know too, but let the audience know where they can, this is another two-parter I like to ask. Where can people find out more about who you are and what you do? And this could be the same, and where can people best connect with you if they want to learn more about you and maybe talk with you about bringing you on as their coach or bringing you into their company as a coach? So yeah, where can people learn more about you and connect with you?
The best place for all of that is Mike-Horne, HORNE.com. And that will take you lots of places. I'd encourage people to, listen to my podcast, Authentic Change with Mike Horne. It's released weekly. I'd encourage people to subscribe on Mike-Horne.com to our newsletter. It's a bi-weekly newsletter with a growing audience. And those are ways to be in touch. And if I can be of service when people visit, yeah, that's great. Mike-Horne.com is the way to get in touch with me. Also, I'm usually pretty active on 3 social media channels on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. You'll find me there. I have a weekly, bi-weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. I encourage people to visit and stop by and engage in a conversation with me or in dialogue about topics that I think are so important about how we bring more of who we are to what we do to work and life.
Excellent. You haven't made the jump to TikTok yet?
No. Maybe I should. Do you think I should?
Honestly, it's short. I know it's sort of almost cliche to say, but short form video is really, it's not going away. And I see a number of coaches doing some very good, speaking of what we've been talking about all day, authentic work. It's one of the ways that you can really put yourself in front of people and express what's important to you and valuable about your coaching in a way that's very accessible. I often, when I'm talking to coaches about it, I'm often like, you want people to have taken as many steps on their journey towards you as possible before you meet. And they get a chance to see you and get to know like your tone of voice, the way you express yourself. It makes them feel like they already know you a little bit. And
yeah, it's great, Kevin. I hadn't thought about that because I do short form video that's certainly distributed on LinkedIn and the other outlets that I mentioned, things that are under a minute and a half or so. I just hadn't thought about that in terms of TikTok, but why not?
And if you ever do get on TikTok, I'm sure people can start at Mike-Horne.com and they'll be able to find you when you're there as well.
It's always the way to go, Kevin.
Mike, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And yeah, I feel like I feel like a Band-Aid ripping off because I'm just like, I kind of don't want to go, but I really should. So thank you for your time. And
thank you and your audience. And I'm certainly ready for the next conversation with Kevin Stafford. It's just a delight to be in conversation with you and with your audience, Kevin.
I may well be reaching back out to you, and I'll wait until the spring just so that enough can happen between now and then. But yeah, I can tell that talking with you is going to be a breeze. So yeah, I'll be having you back on for a part 2 in the not too distant future, if that's all right with you.
That's great, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and to our audience, we will talk to you again very soon.